Alright, we're recording here. We're in the overall campus building. I thought this would be worth looking at for you as you try to clean this out and maybe not deal with many layers in Inventor. I want to point out that there's more tools than you can shake a stick at in AutoCAD and Inventor and in Revit, but a lot of the tools, besides having so many darn tools, what you start to see is all the settings that you might have ignored in the past, especially with regard to viewports. So particularly as I'm trying to clean this out, I came across one here in the Layer 2 toolbar, which is the Viewport Freeze, and the viewport on, off, and the lock, and I want to point that out to you, this idea of settings. I point this out as an inventor. I know I missed the column generator for quite a long time, but this sense here that very often you can have a set of settings for your tools. In this case, I'm going to change the settings for viewports, and I want this choice of either a viewport freeze or a freeze. One is just going to freeze a layer in a particular viewport. Pretty useful if you're setting up plots of many different layers, many different views, and so you want to freeze something off here and not there. It's pretty useful if you've got a couple of viewports on a sheet. And then, of course, using Layer Manager, which you'll see acts oddly or differently depending when whether you're in a model or in paper. So in this case, we want it to be just freeze. So we want it to be everything that's frozen. So now we want an object to be frozen, and if you see kick here, it's going to turn it off everywhere. So we'll try that again. It should be a persistent, but as I zoom within here, probably we don't need to have the toilet stuff on or for the water closet. And so again, I can go to the viewport freeze. Click that one off. You see some of these columns are there. They're probably useful. So at some point you might want to know where all the columns are at. Let's try this one there, and I'm going to try it again. Why I'm finishing the command is basically so we can kind of start to clean some stuff out here. You get now here to the proposed. You see you really don't have any column lines in through here. Form of construction might be differently, or they just didn't get around to showing you the column lines in this case. So this is zooming in on construction, the new construction of a few years ago. We're cleaning it out relatively well. Let's see when we hit that. Gets rid of all the text and all the square footages. You're getting to a relatively clean drawing, if you would. Square footage is there. And so all of these things, of course, you don't need to do, but as you go through, you try to get this so in a relative sense it's not so cluttered. So with that all done, I'm going to, at this point in time, we think we've got all of the column lines still around, and that's primarily what you're going to be pulling off. I'm going to finish this out and show you once again. Let's just check what our coordinate system is, and this is going to be incredibly important. So knowing that the intersection of A1 and A1 is a particular coordinate, and the coordinates here, so I'm just going to go ahead and do an ID on the intersection of that point there. And you know, we're in some odd coordinate system, but it is what it is, and we'll just live with that and not change it off of what they have. We'll play around with it potentially in the future, but we're not going to shift off of what was provided from the architect, because maybe the architect's in charge. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead right now and of course remember to show you the W block. And this W block, we're going to put this out now. I'm going to put this out, this XComp drawing, a little bit winnowed, just so we don't have to play with all of that different stuff on a recurrent basis. Here within AA, and we're going to call it XComp clean. XComp clean. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to select my objects. And one thing that will do, you see now you're only down to 12,756 objects. It'll clean out some of those layers as well. And we're going to do the insert inches as inches, though theirs was probably set up. Hit OK here. We've done a right block out, remembering that that's how we transfer information. I'm going to file and now exit AutoCAD. Save changes to the XComp. No, I don't want to dink with that. Let's see when I go back into AutoCAD whether that is no longer a read-write. Because what was delivered by the architect was read-only, and so You want to go perhaps and not be changing anything there, but using that as a reference then to what you want to do. So if we now go File, Open, XComp Clean, and that's essentially what each of you should probably be working on, right? And if we do something like this and we want to erase it now, we do have that ability. So you don't want to be screwing around with the architect's drawing. You've got now, in essence, something that you can start really cleaning out with freezing and thawing. And mostly what you're looking for at the start are your column lines. That, of course, is the grid, and that is what is important. We want to use the same names that was used by the architect, so we can talk 1AA, 3AA, 5AA, auxiliary 7A, and so if you look over here, you probably have similar numbers here. So when you pull out these grid lines, you want to pull them to be similar. Let's just see if we can now isolate just this, and you'll realize that those blocks there are in fact a 2D object that potentially could be brought in later as a 3D. So we're going to look again at not only the layer 1 but the layer isolate with the different settings. If you notice right down here, settings, you could go to, that's what I've missed through class, S settings, and you want them to be off and not lock and fade. And for viewport use, off. And so now when I go ahead and isolate, I've got that. And why is that? Probably because the blocks were not defined correctly. The blocks were probably not defined on layer 0. So I'm going to do an undo here, an undo, copy, just in the short term, explode, and then when I list that object, you see that it's on SCOLs, and then if I explode again, that object is on SCOLs, and so SCOLs, when I isolate, I need to turn on SCOLs as well. So I'm going to go ahead and isolate, and then layer, and you have to go down it's telling me I got to lay a lot of layer filters, so I want to go to SCOL and turn that on as well, and SCOLs. If you notice, that is why, unless you can think otherwise, you do not make things on layers when you're defining the block. So I'm just going to save this drawing now just as it is. Well, we'll layer manager that and do a new one, just columns, and then kind of going through an AutoCAD and organizing your drawing before bringing it into Revit is probably a good idea, just so you can kind of reestablish those skills. Checking the recording here. We're getting down to the end of time. And so that fact now of, just to prove that it's true, we're going to go minus layer, turn everything on, minus layer, on, star, thaw, star. There's everything. I'm going to do a V point 1, 1, 1, V point 1, 1, 1, and you notice that this is a 2D drawing. And so what we're going to be doing, and it wouldn't be much work in AutoCAD to do it, but it's probably pretty reasonable to do it all in Revit by letting it kind of grab the walls and the like, being aware of where on the wall you're defining and where, especially on the grid lines. So I'm going to go ahead and type plan, and in the end viewports single, okay, and finally save this out, file, save, and that'll be it.